Hello everyone, in today's video we are going to discuss how to play the French defense with the black pieces. And in particular, we are going to discuss a particular variation of 3 knight to d2 in depth and in detail, which is considered one of the most popular variation under the French defense. So this video is going to be extremely critical for all the players who are wanting to learn the French defense and wanting to improve their opening. So I don't want to waste any further time, so let's quickly jump into the video. So we are playing with the black pieces and our opponent with the white pieces starts the game with 1 to e4. And here we play the move e6. This opening is also known as the French defense. d4, g5. And here there are already many ways for white to continue the position. He can play the move e5, the advanced variation. He can capture the pawn, the French exchange, knight to d2, the Tarrasch, knight to c3 to win over, and many more. So today we are going to discuss the move knight to d2 in detail. After knight to d2, there are many possibilities. So after knight d2, we are going to play the move c5. What is the idea of c5? We are basically pushing up the side pawn and challenging the center. That's our idea. So after c5, white is having two main moves to continue the position. One is e into d5 and second is knight to f3. So here first let's try to discuss what happens if white plays the move e into d5. If e into d5, we are going to play queen into d5, because if we try to capture this pawn with the pawn, white will happily capture this pawn, and here we will simply left with an isolated weak pawn which can pose some problems in the future. That's the reason we capture with the queen instead, queen into d5, and here if white plays d into c5, simply taking on c5, here at the place of capturing the pawn with the bishop, which looks kind of very natural, we are going to capture with the queen. Now what's the idea of capturing with the queen? Basically, if you try to capture the pawn with the bishop, white can play something moves like bishop to c4, trying to hit the queen from the d5 square. That's the reason the most ideal square for the queen is to be on the move c7. So that's the reason we play the move queen into c5, so that we can play the move queen to c7 in the future. So after queen into c5, here white plays knight f3, knight to f6, bishop to d3, knight to d7. Basically both the sides are simply focusing on developing the pieces. White short castle, we develop our bishop, and here white plays the move queen to e2, which is one of the most popular moves, and it also makes sense. You are moving your queen because your idea could be to play the move rook to d1, putting the rook on an open file, and the ideas are also like knight to e4 in the future. So after queen to e2, the most natural move in this position is to simply castle. And you can just put this position in the engine. Engine would also agree that short castle is a fine move. But practically speaking, I personally like the move queen to c7 a bit more. Now what is the idea? After queen c7, basically short castle is a move that you can play anytime. There is no way white can ever try to stop your short castle. But if you try to do a short castle, now white is having the opportunity to play the move knight g4 or knight to b3, attacking the queen. So why giving your opponent the privilege to do so, attacking the queen? That's the reason we first play the move queen to c7 in this position. And now our idea is to short castle. After queen to c7, white plays the move knight to e4, which is considered one of the most common move in the position. It also makes sense. You are trying to develop your knight so that you can develop your bishop on the next move via g5. After knight e4, definitely you can also capture the knight, you can do a short castle, but I would say you must play the move b6. What's the idea? Again, you want to simply develop your bishop, that's it. After b6, white captures the knight, and here we capture with the bishop. Why? Because if you try to capture the knight with the knight, there could be some ideas with bishop to b5 check. Why allow it? But play bishop into f6, and the bishop on f6 is simply extremely strong. So after bishop into f6, white plays rook d1, putting the rook on an open file. And after rook d1, you can't really short castle because of queen e4, attacking checkmate and also attacking the rook. So after rook d1, you can simply play the move bishop b7, developing the piece. And after bishop b7, here the most practical move in the position, it looks like bishop b5. And it also makes sense, you are hitting the knight 2 times. So black is kind of forced to play the move rook d8, developing the protecting the knight. And here after rook d8, a move like queen d3. And after queen d3, what's the idea? After queen d3, white is saying that black, you can't really short castle because I can capture the knight. But in this position, you can actually short castle, because after short castle, if white tries to capture the knight, you can already play the move rook into d7. And after queen into d7, now we are going to surprise our opponent by playing the move rook to d8. And for your surprise, the opponent can't capture the queen because it's mate. So, and if you try to move your queen, I can simply capture the rook and it's still a mate. So you have to give up the queen for the rook and it's completely winning position for black. So that's the reason. But the main problem with short castle here is white is having a very strong move with knight to g5. That's the reason we first play the move h6 in order to stop the move knight g5. And now there is no way white can ever stop black from doing a short castle. So take a random move like bishop e3, short castle. And after bishop into d7, you can already play the move bishop to c6, because now the same thing won't work, because after rook d8, the rook is protected by the rook. That's it. So you simply play the move bishop to c6. The bishop can't move because the queen would be hanging. So after queen d6, you can simply capture the bishop, takes checks, and this position is better for black, because there are many ways you can say this position is better for black, because first of all, black is having the bishop pair. Second, I can already play the move rook to c8, developing on the c file, and these pawns on the queen side could be target for black to capture in the future. So these were the small details, minor details in this particular variation. So let's go back a bit. So this is what happens if your opponent plays the move d into c5. So now let's try to discuss what happens if your opponent plays the move knight to f3, trying to develop your piece. We simply capture the pawn, bishop to c4 the main move, we pull back the queen, and here there are again many ways for white to continue the position. There is knight e4, knight to b3, queen to e2, and short castle. Definitely short castle is the most popular move in the position, but first let's check all the sidelines. If knight to e4 in the position, we can already play queen to b4 check, giving a check and also attacking the bishop. So knight d2 is a forced move, and simply knight f6, developing the pieces. My idea is to simply capture the knight, and white can't recapture it back because the king is simply pinned up. So knight into f6, the most common move, g into f6, short castle, and here you can already play the move bishop d7. Black is having a very comfortable and flexible position, because first of all, we are leaving possibilities for in this position for our pieces. Which piece comes to c6? We can simply play bishop d6, doing a long castle, rook to g8, putting pressure on the white king, and black is already having a menacing attack. So this is how you can simply continue this position with the move knight to e4. So after queen to d6, now let's try to discuss what happens after knight to b3. After knight b3, definitely white's idea is to capture the pawn, but here again we are going to play queen to b4 check, the same idea. So basically now white is forced to go back with knight d2, and basically white simply wasted the move. So now we can simply develop our knight to c6, and black is extremely happy in this position. So knight to b3 is already a bad move. So now let's talk about the move short castle, which is the main move. After short castle, we are going to play the move knight to f6. The idea is to simply stop the move knight to e4. So knight to b3 in this position, knight to c6, and here white simply captures the pawn on d4. After knight into d4, we capture the knight, and here again white is having two possibilities to continue the position, which is queen into d4 and knight into d4. First, let's talk about what happens after queen into d4. After queen into d4, we are going to play queen into d4, knight d4, and bishop to c5, simply focusing on developing our pieces, simply attacking the knight. And here, white is having two ways to continue the position: knight to b3, the best move, and knight to b5, tempting option. First, let's try to discuss what happens after knight b5. After knight b5, white's idea is to play knight c7, attack the king and the rook. We simple short castle, knight to c7, rook to b8. And after bishop f4, white is hoping to move the knight and try to scare black that he's going to capture the rook. But here, simply bishop d7. After bishop d7, my idea is to simply play the move rook c8. For example, after rook g1, rook c8. And in this position, what can you even play in this position? My idea is to play bishop to b6, attacking the rook, attacking the knight and at the same time capturing the bishop. So I would simply be a piece up. So here bishop d3 is the main move, the best move. So that after bishop b6, knight b5, the bishop simply defends the knight. That's the best option. But I can simply capture the knight and at the same time capture the pawn on c2. And black is going to be a pawn up with a completely winning position because the f2 pawn, the b2 pawn is hanging, completely winning position for white. So that's the reason knight to b5 is already a big blunder. So knight to b3, the main move. After knight b3, we simply pull our bishop back. a4, a5. Knight to d2, bishop to d7. Keep focusing on developing your pieces. Bishop d3. We have already entered into the endgame part. You just need to develop your pieces rapidly. Short castle, knight to c4, bishop to c7. Always remember, guys, bishop pair is always better than a lone bishop. So try to always keep the bishop pair. So after bishop c7, black is having a very comfortable position. Rook d8, rook c8 could be the idea. Bishop c6, knight to d5, and black is already very comfortable in the position. It's an equal position and nothing to worry about. So this is exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move queen into d4. So now let's try to discuss what happens if your opponent plays the move knight into d4. After knight into d4, we play the move bishop to e7. Now many players in this position at the past like to play the move a6, trying to stop the move knight to b5. But I would say don't get afraid, simply develop your piece with bishop to e7. So after bishop to e7, there are many possibilities for white to continue the position. First, let's try to discuss what happens after knight to b5. After knight b5, white is trying to hit the queen. And here, we simply play the move queen to c6. Not scared of anything. Because every dark square is covered up, the bishop is hanging. So white is forced to move the bishop, but queen to e2 also works. Defending the bishop, idea is to play rook d1, keep developing the pieces. But here we can simply play the move a6. Hitting this knight, the knight goes back and now queen to c7 because the queen was hanging. So after queen c7, black is already very comfortable and I would say white simply wasted the time with knight to b5, knight d4 because white has achieved absolutely nothing in this position. After queen c7, black side is to simply play short castle, maybe b5, bishop b7, or bishop d7, bishop c6, rook d8, or rook c8, rook d8. Black is extremely comfortable. So that's the reason knight to b5 is already a bad move. So after bishop b7, we have already looked at the move knight to b5, which is a bad move. So now let's try to discuss what happens if white plays the move c3. It doesn't matter if white starts with rook e1 or c3, it eventually lands in the same position. So let's focus on the move c3. After c3, we are going to play the move short castle. And here white plays the move queen to f3. Now there are two ways to continue the position from the white side, which is queen f3 and rook e1. First, let's focus on queen to f3. After queen to f3, now that's the whole idea of playing the move c3, to defend the knight and move the queen. After queen f3, white's idea is to play the move bishop f4, attack the queen. So after queen to f3, we are going to play the move queen to c7, simply attacking the bishop. The bishop goes to the move bishop to d3, and after bishop d3, we play the move bishop d7. What's the idea? First of all, we are focusing on developing our pieces, and second, we are also covering the square of b5. So after bishop to d7, the point here is after rook e1, we develop our rook as well, and after bishop f4, attacking the queen. Now there is the main idea of putting the bishop on d7 because it covers the b5 square, so that after bishop f4, we can play the move bishop to d6. And now there is no knight to b5 attacking the queen and the bishop. So that's the whole idea. After bishop d6, bishop takes, queen takes. And the position is very comfortable for black. In this position, white must remember, if white tries to capture the pawn, you are already having the move e5. Let me just show you, e5. And black simply wins the piece and eventually the game. And this position is very comfortable indeed. You can play the move maybe bishop c6 simply, or e5, bishop c6, or yeah, that's it. Black is very comfortable in this position. So this is what happens if your opponent plays the move bishop to d3. Now let's try to discuss what happens if your opponent plays the move bishop to b3. After bishop b3, we play the move a5. What's the idea? Definitely we want to play the move a4. So white stops it by playing a4, but now simply bishop d7. And what's the key difference in this position? Basically, we provoked white to play the move a4. So now the bishop is actually not well defended on b3. You are going to see in the future, after bishop d7, let's take the move bishop to f4, which is the main move. Bishop d6, takes, and here the point is, if white tries to capture the pawn, rook to b8, the queen moves, and after e5, the knight moves, the bishop is hanging, and the knight cannot move, and the knight would be dead. So this position is winning for black. So this is what happens after queen b7. So if rook e1 in case, now queen to b6. And this position is very comfortable for black because white cannot move the knight because the bishop would be hanging. And my idea could already be to play the move bishop c6, knight c6, bc6, putting pressure on the b file. And position is equalish. There is no reason to worry a bit. So this is what happens if your opponent plays the move queen to f3. Now let's try to discuss what happens if your opponent plays the move rook to e1, developing the rook. After rook e1, we play the move bishop d7, again focusing on developing the pieces. Queen to f3, again the idea is bishop f4 indeed. So we play the move queen c7, attacking the bishop. The bishop goes to f1 this time, not to d3 or to b3. And here we play the move knight to d5. What's the idea? We are stopping the move bishop to f4. Knight to f5 in this position. White's trying to be a bit sneaky, that if you try to capture the knight, white can also capture our knight, and white would be having a pleasant position. So we play the move bishop c5, simply not giving up the bishop pair. c4 this time, attacking the knight, but now simply we can happily capture this knight. Pawn takes knight, rook to e8, bishop to f4, attacking the queen, but you can simply move the queen, attacking the pawn on b2, and also at the same time putting pressure on the pawn on f2. So this position is, I would say, equalish. There is no problem at all for any side of the player. Both the players are having their advantages and disadvantages. Black's weakness is the pawn on d5. This could be a potential pass pawn, but it is extremely hard for white to push this pawn. So I would say eventually this position should be a draw. So yeah, this is what happens if your opponent plays the move rook to e1 at the start in this position. Okay, so in today's video we have discussed the main move, which is e into d5, queen into d5, and we have discussed away lord, the move knight f3, and also d into c5 in total depth. In the next video, we are going to discuss the complete repertoire of knight to f3, how to respond to knight f3. I don't want to make this video lengthy, that's the reason I'm keeping it in the next part. So if you learned anything new in this particular video, then make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. Because it's free for you, but it helps us to motivate to make videos like this. And I think today is 14th February, so my target should be to reach maybe 7,000 subscribers at the end of this month. Currently, we are running at 6,857 subscribers maybe. Let's keep the target of reaching 7,000 subscribers till the end of the month. So I'm going to see you soon, so till then stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess.